So good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Kraft from Forum Europe, and we're delighted to be working with Ericsson, GSMA, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE to provide the platform for this morning's seminar. So a very warm welcome to you all to this event, which of course is going to be focusing on 6 gigahertz opportunities for society, and mainly focusing on Europe. In a second, I'm going to pass you over to your host and moderator for the session, Alessandro Casagni. But just before I do, I did just want to say a very few words about the platform that we're using for the event today. The platform that we're using is very easy to navigate around. You have just two areas that we're using for the different sessions today. The first area, which you will be in at the moment, is the stage, and all of the presentations, all of the presentations and the speeches will be happening in the area here. The second area on the menu bar on the left-hand side is the Q&A area. So we do ask you to submit any questions that you may have for speakers using the chat area on the right-hand side of your screen. And then at the end of towards the end of the session today, once we've heard from all of our speakers, we'll be moving to the Q&A area, which you can access using the menu bar on the left-hand side, where our speakers will be addressing those questions. So please do submit your questions there. And as I said, we need to move to the second area for the Q&A session later on. But for now, I'd like to once again welcome you all to the session. As I said, all of the presentations will be happening in the stage here. So we're running through the program in this area here. Without further ado, I would like to now welcome to the stage your moderator for the session, Alessandro Casagni from Huawei. Alessandro, welcome. We're looking forward to the presentations and the discussion. So without further ado, I will pass over to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. Thank you to Forum Europe for helping us setting up this webinar. And good morning to all of you. Welcome to this 6 gigahertz IMT Opportunity for Society webinar. We will be focusing on the European perspective today. This, as Dan has already mentioned, is a webinar which is jointly hosted by Ericsson, the GSMA, Huawei, Nokia, and ZTE. I am Alessandro Casagni, and I am Director of Regulatory Policy for EMEA at Huawei. We really would like to thank each one of you for joining us today in these difficult days for some of us. And I will be moderating this event on behalf of the 5 co-hosts. I would like to start very briefly sharing with you the European context on the matter that we are discussing today. So there is an ongoing debate in Europe on one very important issue, which is the spectrum needs for IMT. We are aware the European Commission is now putting together its new radio spectrum policy program, which is going to target the spectrum strategy for Europe 2025-2030. The RSPG is now writing an opinion to support the Commission in this task, and the RSPG is also writing an opinion on spectrum needs. In addition, Europe is also starting to debate about which bands will be available to satisfy the future needs. And with this respect, the RSPG is writing an opinion for WRC23. And we are actually now in the middle between the deadline for submission for stakeholders and administrations replies to the ECC questionnaire on the usage of the 6 gigahertz band and also the expectations for the future. And just a few days before the WRC preparatory meeting for, in particular, agenda item 1.2, which will be addressed by ECCPT1 in a few days. We are all aware that the deployment of 5G is bringing large benefits to users and society. We are starting from the existing trends, and we are anticipating the future trends to elaborate on the importance of making available more spectrum for IMT, and in particular more mid-band spectrum for IMT to help delivering on the 5G vision. And of course, we are convinced the 6 gigahertz band can have a role in this, and actually it represents a very interesting candidate for this. We have today an impressive group of speakers. We are very proud of this. We thank each one of them. We have representatives from several administrations in Europe, and also representatives from Region 1 outside Europe. We have two leading associations of mobile operators from Europe and globally, and of course the leading suppliers which are co-hosting this event. Let me go through very quickly, thank you Dan, the structure, the agenda for today. We will be starting from a keynote session which will be shared between Stefan Zelle, co-founder of and CEO of Colleago Consulting, and Glenn Carter, who is Senior Spectrum Advisor at GSMA. After this keynote session, we will go in Regulators Corner, where we will meet Buxton Sirevu, Director of Technical Service Engineer, Post and Telecommunications Regulator, POTRATS from Zimbabwe. We are going to have also an intervention from Mr. Sergei Rudko, Program Manager at Geyser Telecom Limited, Russia, from the Russian Federation. And he is also coordinator on WRC 23 Agenda Item 1.2, 1.3 at the RCC, Regional Commonwealth in the field of communication. After Sergei, Professor Sassano, Antonio Sassano, will be presenting, and he is president of Fondazione Ugo Bordoni, that is the in-house independent foundation which assists the Italian public administrations on all the ICT issues. After that, there will be Mr. Chris Wolford, Director of International Spectrum Policy at Ofcom UK, and then Mr. Jan Engelberg, Senior Advisor working for Digital Connection, Digital Infrastructure Unit in the Finnish Transport and Communication Agency, Traficom. After that, Sarunas Oberauskas will be closing the Regulators Corner. He's advisor of Spectrum and Engineering Divisions at RTT, Communications Regulatory Authority of Lithuania. After the Regulators Corner, we will move quickly to the Industry Corner, where we will meet Marit Palovirta, Director of Regulatory Affairs at ETNO, European Telecommunications Network Operator Association. After that, Ayman Mohiuddin, Senior Specialist Spectrum Regulation, Nokia, and she will be representing the views from the co-hosting equipment suppliers. And then we will see again Glenn Carter from the GSMA. He will be presenting a statement from industry. Once we close the Regulators Corner and the Industry Corner, we will be entering the Q&A. We will do our best to save half an hour for this part to have a meaningful debate. And after that, I will be wrapping up very quickly. So we are ready to start. And I would like now to open the keynote session and leaving the floor to Stefan Zelle, who is co-founder and CEO of Colleago Consulting Firm. Stefan has 29 years experience in telecom consulting. He served as director for a mobile operator in the past. He is an expert in strategy and business planning, spectrum-related issues such as spectrum policy, valuation, and auctions. He holds an MBA awarded by University of Westminster in 1991. Stefan will take us through the drivers for the spectrum needs. He will be presenting on modeling mid-band spectrum supply and demand for area traffic density in cities, and he will be exploring the role of mid-bands for fixed wireless access outside of cities. So, dear Stefan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro. Yes, I'll be looking at demand for IMT spectrum in the 2025 to 2030 timeframe. Next slide, please. First, I'll look at the demand for IMT spectrum to realize the 5G vision, because this is, after all, what we're trying to achieve. Then look specifically at demand for spectrum in 11 European cities. And lastly, as cost savings that could be achieved if additional spectrum is available to cost savings to achieve the European Union 100 megabits connectivity target. Next slide, please. So I'll be looking specifically at mid-band spectrum up to 7 gigahertz. First, I look at mobile operators' future needs for additional spectrum in cities, so to support mobile outdoor traffic in cities and high-density areas. And then I look at using FWA instead of FTTH to bring the 100 megabits connectivity target to rural households in the European area. Next slide, please. First of all, sometimes the question arises, is 5G just another G, just an evolution of 4G? And I think it's more like a revolution. What we have is much more than simply people with smartphones. We have that, of course, but much faster and better. But we also have the other 4 elements of 5G: fixed wireless access, massive machine type communication, and critical machine type communication. So with that, the vision for 5G is for ubiquitous fiber-like user experience and connectivity for a wide range of use cases. And there is that expectation of a near guaranteed data rate. And that is really different from 4G, which we could characterize as a best effort service. Next slide, please. And this is inherent really in the IMT 2020 requirements as drawn up by ITUR. And the 2 things that are critical in the context of spectrum is, first of all, the user experience data rate, which is a factor 10, not 10%, factor 10 increase compared to LTE-A. And then the area traffic capacity, we are looking at a factor 100 increase. So the vision for 5G, as I said, should provide the users with 100 megabits in the downlink and 50 megabits in the uplink anytime, anywhere, whilst on the move. Next slide, please. Of course, there are a variety of spectrum resources to make this possible anywhere in the country, but I'll be focusing specifically on the upper mid bands, so 3.3 to 7 gigahertz. That's what I'll be looking at. Next slide, please. So what we have done is, and there's a report available for you as well, we looked specifically at the demand in 11 cities in Europe. Next slide, please. So our model, the starting point for our model is the ITU requirement, because after all, this is what the world signed up to: deliver that 100 megabits data rate anytime, anywhere, with a very high probability of achieving it, near guaranteed. So we're using population density as a proxy, but of course not everybody will be demanding 100 megabits simultaneously in the same cell. We therefore have an activity factor which looks at what might be the concurrent demand from human as well as other users, because after all, 5G is very much about other devices, machines, cars, etc. Of course, not all the traffic would need to be carried by additional mid-band spectrum. There will be offload to millimeter wave, and there will be indoor small cells. So some of the traffic will be offloaded to this type of infrastructure. And that gives us our traffic demand, mobile traffic demand per square kilometers, measured in gigabits per square kilometer. Now on the supply side, and these are the blue boxes there, we have macro and micro sites with their respective intersite distance and sectorization, the amount of spectrum deployed, and we have assumed all of the spectrum is deployed and everything will be 5G eventually. And we have the spectral efficiency, which gives us the capacity supply per square kilometer. Again, at gigabits per square kilometer. Next slide, please. Now, first of all, we need to identify the high density area. Paris is a perfect example because the city of Paris, the 20 arrondissements, they're roughly, well, they are on the inside the Boulevard Périphérique, and the area is 85 square kilometers, and the population density is 25,000 people per square kilometer. The next slide, please. At the other end of the scale, we have got, we looked at the Amsterdam, The Hague area. This is really not a sort of closely bunched together city, but it's in an area which, an urban area, within it you find several high density area. The high density area, 72 square kilometers, with an average population density just below 10,000. Next slide, please. Here are the other cities, and you can see the population densities range from 25,000, 24,000 of the Paris and Madrid to, at the low end, Amsterdam. And I like to stress, these are not necessarily administrative boundaries, but these are picking out high density areas within an urbanized area. Next slide, please. So first of all, how about the concurrent demand? That's where we use the activity factor. So concurrent demand we represent in the model in the shape of an activity factor. And as I said, we use population density as a proxy. So we're simply saying what percentage might demand that 100 megabits simultaneously in the small cell. Next slide, please. Of course, we know traffic is going up, smartphone usage is heading towards fixed usage, and increased usage also means people are using data for longer. You may be aware that the original target of the European Union, 100 megabits, many countries have chosen to go beyond that. The target, for example, in Germany is now the gigabit society, and that is being to some extent reflected in mobile, because what we can see is unlimited data plans, and what operators are selling are no longer gigabytes, they're no longer selling volume, but they're selling speed, and that translates into higher activity factor, which may be in the order of 20% or so. Next slide, please. Now I mentioned the offload. Of course, depending on the city, 10 to 30% of demand may be served by high bands, i.e. millimeter wave, 26 gigahertz and upwards. And that is to deliver the area traffic capacity of 10 megabits per square meter, because you couldn't get there simply with upper mid-band spectrum. Furthermore, we assume that 10% of the traffic will be uploaded to upper mid-band indoor small cells, as for example in a shopping center. Next slide, please. So I'd like to say that deducts from the outdoor demand so as not to overestimate the demand for spectrum. Now, on the supply side, what assumptions have we made? They're shown on this slide. We assume an average intersite distance of 400 meters for macro sites. We assume that there are 3 small cells per macro site. The sectorization, 3 sectors, typical, only 1 for small cells. And then you see the downlink and uplink spectral efficiency. As regards the available spectrum, we have a baseline, which we assume there may be some differences between countries, but roughly in Europe, we're looking at 190 megahertz in low band, 460 megahertz in the lower mid band. That's all the legacy spectrum. And then in 3.5, typically 400, in some countries less, for example, only 300 in Germany. And then we ask ourselves, fine, additional mid-band spectrum, how much do we need? And that is the output from the spectrum demand model. Next slide, please. So, of course, one of the big stories is that the number of cell sites will increase vastly. And this is because operators are now constructing small cells. And we assume that in that sort of time frame, we have 3 small cells per macro site in cities. So as you can see, the number of sites would increase by a factor of 4, which is really quite aggressive in a way, but it does show that we did not assume that operators stop building sites. On the contrary, they built many more sites, and yet we need more spectrum, as you will see on the next slide. Next slide, please. So what we are comparing then is traffic demand per square kilometer with capacity supply per square kilometer based on these assumptions I showed in the previous slides. Next slide, please. So this chart looks a little bit complicated. Let me talk you through it. That's essentially the output from the modeling. On the horizontal x-axis, this is the population density, because that is a key variable with regards to demand gigabits per square kilometer. The vertical axis, that is the capacity of traffic demand, and the colored upward sloping line, that is the traffic demand per square kilometer, depending on A, the population density, and B, the activity factor. So the higher the activity factor at a given population density, the higher the demand in terms of gigabits per square kilometer. You can also see some horizontal dashed line there. The lowest dashed line, that's a baseline. We are assuming no additional midband spectrum. Then we have 1 gigahertz of additional midband and 2 gigahertz of additional midband spectrum. And we show the various cities we have modeled as vertical lines. So you have Marseille, which is the lowest density, through to Paris on the highest density. And where the colored upward sloping lines cross the vertical city population density line, this is the capacity you would need to supply, and by implication, the amount of spectrum you would need to deliver this. So, for example, if I take Barcelona, which is, and let's say we have an activity factor of just 15%, you can see the orange line there is crossing the Barcelona vertical line roughly at 1 gigahertz of additional spectrum. So that scenario, to satisfy that scenario, you would need 1 gigahertz of additional mid-band spectrum. Next slide, please. This shows in table format how much spectrum is required depending on what activity factor we assume, 10, 15, 20, or 25, as well as high bands offloads. 30% is, I think, a pretty optimistic assumption for high bands offloads. So some folks might say, no, it's only going to be 10 or 20%. So that's why we assumed the range, because frankly, we don't know what it is, because high bands haven't really been deployed in Europe, and even in the US, where they have been deployed, there's not very much of that deployment. So there's very little experience, hence the range we have given. But you can see that the higher the population density, the lower the offload and the higher the activity factor, that gives you the highest spectrum need. If you assume the activity factor is very low and there will be a lot of offload, then in some of the cities, you don't need any additional spectrum. But I think in most cases, we're looking at least 1 gigahertz of additional spectrum. Next slide, please. Of course, we also have to fulfill the downlink requirement of 50 megabits. Next slide, please. And this yields or results in additional spectrum demand if you would like to fulfill the combined downlink and uplink requirement. Next slide, please. Just as a sense check, I looked at what is the city average traffic density we are talking about. And you can see from this chart, so you could see that mostly it's around about 600 gigabits per square kilometer. Now, that's only 3% of the local peak. The ITU is requiring 10 megabits per square meter. So what we're forecasting is, or saying, assuming in this model, is only 3% of that. So that's quite reasonable. And then on the right-hand side, a simple example, we have a London Routemaster bus, which most of you might be familiar with because lots of folks travel to London. The area of that bus is 25 square meter. 80 people could be in there. If 10% are using video at 4K, that gives an area traffic demand of 6.4 megabits per square meter. So not far off that ITU number of 10 megabits per square meter. Next slide, please. Of course, under this scenario, as I said, lots of small cell investment is needed. And this is why having more spectrum could also be useful in areas with a population density of less than 9,000, because you'd have to construct less cell sites, which of course delivers environmental, visual benefits. Next slide, please. I now like to look a little bit at the cost savings you could achieve if additional spectrum is available, the cost savings to achieve the EU 100 megabits connectivity target. Next slide, please. So the thing is, Europe is still far away from reaching that target, which needs to be delivered in 2025. And the gap is huge in rural. As of 2019, only 18% of rural homes actually had available 100 megabits. And the price tag to deliver this is estimated at 123 billion. That's from the FTTH Council, cost study. So those are not our own numbers, but I think it's a pretty good study, and I think it's also used by the European Union as an indicator. Next slide, please. And this study also provides useful information with regards to the cost of rolling out fiber in Europe. The cost of rolling out fiber increases disproportionately in rural because we have areas with lower population density. So the average cost of connecting a rural household with FTTH is around 2,000 euros. Next slide, please. Of course, the FTTH the FWA business case improves if we have lots of spectrum available, which we can deploy on an existing mobile site to support FWA, which of course requires that 100 megabits and perhaps more in the longer term. So 100 megabits, if we only have the baseline spectrum, by the way, the baseline here, I only used 400 megahertz because I've assumed the other spectrum needs to be there for mobile capacity. So 400 megahertz as the baseline. But if we get an additional 1 gigahertz, we can serve 315 households instead of 90. And if we get 2 gigahertz, we can save 540 households from a single site if we assume all the spectrum is deployed. And you can see that here on the table. Well, the thing is, if the speed need goes up, if suddenly people say, okay, we need 1 gigabit, then the number of households that can be supported reduces a bit. Incidentally, we have assumed a 50% concurrent use, which seems to be reasonable because after all, what are people doing? They're streaming in the evening, they're streaming video programs and so on, and they do it all at the same time. Next slide, please. This is an example to bring this to light. Rural doesn't mean that the population density is very low across the entire area, but in fact, people are bunched together. This is an example from France, Gordes in France, population 1,800. So we're looking probably in the neighborhood of 700, 600 households, something like that. And you can see the area is not really that big. So if you put a single site in the center of town, there's probably one near the town already, and you stick all the additional spectrum on it, you could cover the entire town or small town or village with FWH. Next slide, please. And if we, because the cost of providing connectivity using 5G FWA with additional spectrum is significantly lower. In fact, the cost saving compared to connecting households, if we use the 100 megabits targets, is up to 79%, 79% lower compared to doing it with fiber. If you go to 1 gigabits, then it becomes more expensive if you only use upper mid-band spectrum. But of course, millimeter wave spectrum will also be available. So this is where a combination of upper mid-band spectrum and millimeter wave spectrum could still deliver FWA connectivity, even as 1 gigabit is required. Next slide, please. And but the target is 100 megabits. And if we look at the amount that's required, 53 billion of the 123 billion investment is needed in rural. And if we bring this down by 79%, if all the spectrum is available, then that's a saving of 42 billion in capex spent. And I'm sure you agree, that's not a small sum. So that's a huge value that would be generated by making available additional upper mid-band spectrum for 5G IMT. Next slide, please. And with that, thank you very much. As I said, the report is available on our website and also on the GSMA website. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I see on the chat box that you already received a few questions, which we'll be happy to take at the end during the Q&A. Thank you again. Now I'd like to turn to Glyn Carter. As I said, Glyn is Senior Spectrum Advisor at the GSMA, and you all know the GSMA is an association that groups several hundreds of operators globally. Glyn has been involved in spectrum management issues for 20 years. His main focus since he joined the GSMA in 2012 is future spectrum. So Glyn is very familiar with the WRC preparation. He's active in the context of ITR and CPT. And Glyn is also active to promote the availability of harmonized spectrum for 5G, progressing those bands that have been identified, for example, in WRC 15 and 19. Glyn holds a bachelor degree in mathematics and PhD in cryptography from London University. And Glyn will be telling us about the importance to mobile operators globally of the 6 gigahertz band for IMT. And he will be giving suggestions on the approach for the 6 gigahertz band. So, Glyn, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about the importance of the 6 gigahertz band for mobile connectivity and the opportunity that this provides to boost the capacity and coverage and reduce the cost for mobile broadband. Getting 6 gigahertz right will be a very important factor and have a major impact on the future of 5G. Next slide, please. The affordability of mobile broadband will be an important factor in driving up the use of broadband. The majority of the 6 billion people in the world who are currently unconnected to the internet lie within mobile broadband coverage. And there are a number of reasons for this, but one of the major ones is the cost of that service. This is particularly the case for developing countries, but the affordability of mobile broadband is also an important factor in areas such as Europe. And it's important that capacity and coverage can be provided by mobile broadband in a cost-effective manner. Next slide, please. Mid-band spectrum is being considered at WRC 23 in a number of different bands, as you can see on this diagram. This mid-band spectrum will be critical for providing citywide mobile broadband and for achieving the benefits that 5G can bring. And this needs to be able to be provided by operators in an affordable affordable manner for capacity and for bringing the benefits of 5G. Starting with the 3.5 gigahertz band, this is obviously the initial 5G launch band in most countries around the world. But it is clear that there will be the need to expand the spectrum in years to come. Next slide, please. Regarding the 6 gigahertz band, this is being treated differently in different I2R regions. However, as countries begin to maximize the usage of the 3.5 gigahertz band, there'll be a need to consider how 5G expansion can be achieved. And 6 gigahertz provides the clearest path in order to be able to do this on a global basis, in order to provide affordable 5G expansion. And in many cases, in fact, this is the only option available to do this. So there is clearly a need to get mid-band right at WRC 23 and more widely. This will need to take account of the need for harmonization. There will be the need for wide channel bandwidths. And this can have a huge impact on mobile broadband services and the cost of those services in the future. Next slide, please. We've already heard from Stefan from Colliagio about the study they have performed on the demand for future mid-band spectrum. So suffice to say here that it's clear that there is the need for additional mid-band spectrum for operators to be able to provide 5G services in the 2025 to 2030 timeframe. Next slide, please. If we look at what is already happening with the 6 gigahertz band, we see that decisions are already being taken, or at least considered, in different parts of the world. However, this is being done at a time where there are lots of unanswered questions relating to this. For example, creating a band for unlicensed use is something which is very difficult to reverse, and a lot of care needs to be taken in order to make these decisions. How much unlicensed spectrum is needed and why this is needed is also still an open question. And if decisions are taken in haste, which prove to be the wrong ones, for example, as we saw in the case of WiMAX in the past, then it can take a long time to unwind those decisions. There is also the need to protect important backhaul and fixed links in this band. And licensed 5G provides the path to create high reliability connectivity for a variety of critical applications, something which unlicensed Wi-Fi is not able to provide. So to very quickly conclude, if I go to the next slide. So there are many questions still to be answered with regard to the 6 gigahertz band, but it is clear that there is a need to ensure continued expansion and growth for mobile broadband services, and to enable 5G to develop in the future in an affordable way. And 6 gigahertz will play a very important, indeed critical role in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Glyn. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I would like now to move on to the next speaker, Buxton Sirevu. Buxton works for the administration of Zimbabwe as Director of Technical Services in Potrats, Post and Telecom Regulator. Professional telecommunication engineer, Buxton is active in the ATU, where he is chairman of the task group on emerging technologies, dealing with the development of harmonized implementation of 5G in Africa. Within the ITU, Buxton is active in Working Party 5D, where he is rapporteur for ATU, and is chairman for the sub-working group responsible for agenda item 1.1 in WSC 23, which is the one dealing with 4.84990 gigahertz band. And Buxton will help us understanding the opportunity for African society and how Africa can benefit from the 6 gigahertz band. So over to you, Buxton. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Alessandra, and thank you for this opportunity. I also would like to thank Stefan and Glyn, who have come before me and raised quite a few issues relating to developing countries. So if we can go to my introductory slide, please, which is the background. So, sorry. From an African perspective, we take that this conversation is taking place at a very important time in the development of broadband. It is taking place at a time when the world is faced with the COVID pandemic, which has ravaged economies and has caused quite a huge loss of lives across the globe. So the reality that has come out from this pandemic is that there is need for equitable access to broadband services. In Africa, what we have seen and experienced is that since the outset of the pandemic, the majority of children have failed to attend school as schools are closed. While those in urban areas where broadband is accessible have at least managed to get along doing their education through online means. Those in rural areas have no means to continue with education. And the same applies to businesses, and the same applies to even access to healthcare. So as we go forward, we realize that there is need for more inclusive access to broadband. And if it does not happen, then even the fourth industrial revolution that we're talking about will remain a pipe dream for developing countries. So further to that, the context within which Africa looks at this matter is that our copper infrastructure is quite minuscule. There is nothing much to talk about, especially outside urban areas. And the same applies with fiber. So Africa looks to either satellite or IMT mobile infrastructure for access to broadband. And I must mention that our experience is that IMT is the mainstream technology through which broadband is accessed. So we are happy that at WRC 19, the world community agreed to include agenda item 1.2, which looks at the mid-band frequencies for possible access to, for possible identification for IMT. This is important to us because we believe these mid-band frequencies have got the appropriate propagation characteristics to help us address the issues of rural connectivity that I've talked about, and to provide the necessary, as was indicated by Stefan, everyone needs fiber-like experience, and we also need that in rural Africa. Next slide, please. So what is it that Africa is doing? We are following and not going ahead of the ITU process with respect to this 6 gigahertz band. So within its structures, the ATU has got what we call the Africa Preparatory Meeting Structure. And this is where we have successive meetings in preparation for WRC 23. So under that arrangement, we have got that structure which is shown, where we have the APM and we have working groups, 7 of them, with 2 looking at chapter 1 of the CPM. And working group 1A is responsible for agenda item 1.2, which is the mid-band frequencies. The next slide, please. So what are the considerations for ATU with respect to mid-band frequencies? First of all, the mid-band frequencies have got incumbent services which are important to Africa. That includes fixed satellite and also fixed service, which we use for backhaul. So for fixed satellite, we are cognizant of the fact that a large portion of the mid-band frequencies under consideration are also in Appendix 30B, and we have got issues where we have to be careful as we consider frequencies under Appendix 30B. However, that being the case, we have all the confidence in the WRC preparatory processes and the studies that are going on in Working Party 5D. And we look forward to maximization of harmonization in this band. So we look to at least a regional harmonization in the band 6425 to 7025. And we also, through that, would like to achieve, we realize that we will achieve international roaming and ease of cross-border interference management. If we could go to the next slide, please. And as for the benefits, the band is globally allocated to the mobile service, which has been shown by Glenn. And we need, as Africa, to compensate for a gap in the mid-band spectrum. Africa does not have access to the 3.6 to 4.2 gigahertz band for IMT, reason being that we are heavily dependent on satellite as well. So that is, in most countries of Africa, reserved for satellite. So these mid-band frequencies, 6 gig that we are considering, will help us cover that gap. So we expect that the fixed wireless access, 5G fixed wireless access, will come in handy in helping us bridge the digital divide in rural areas. With that, I present. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you a lot, Baxter, for enriching our discussion with the perspectives from Africa. Thank you. So let's now move on to our colleague Sergei Rudko. Sergei is program manager at Geyser Telecom Limited from the Russian Federation. He is co-coordinator on agenda item 1.2 and 1.3 for, of course, WC23 at the Regional Commonwealth of Field Communication, the RCC. That, of course, as you know, is representing 18 countries in Eastern Northern Europe. He is a spectrum regulator expert of satellite and terrestrial services. And Sergei will provide the preliminary position from the RCC administrations on agenda item 1.2 and some insights also on the activities planned by the Russian Federation. So Sergei, the floor is yours.
Sergey, I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander, and good day to everyone. I would like to present you some information with regard to mid-band issue in RCC countries. Having dealt with mid-bands, we have a lot of opportunity with respect to the balance of great data speed together with wide coverage of IMT. Taking this, the issue of allocation mid-bands for IMT have been considered at previous WRC conference of ITUR for some bands, in particular in the range from 3 to 6 gigahertz band. And we know some bands was allocated or identified for IMT. However, decision did not fully satisfy all countries, in particular the RCC country, due to number of limitations with respect to compatibility with other services. And the RCC were one of the regional group who proposed at WRC to consider mid-band, especially we propose 6525 to 7100 megahertz, taking into account that in the 3 gigahertz range, we have some difficulty for implementation of IMT due to we have a wide use of fixed lead service in RCC country. Therefore, the RCC country considered 6 gigahertz bands as one of the key bands for development and launch 5G in our region. Currently, RCC country are conducting study for harmonization 6 gigahertz bands. Next slide, please. Okay, you can see our preliminary position on RCC administration with respect to the agenda item 1.2 for 6 gigahertz band as approved at the previous RCC meeting. Actually, our position is divided to the 4 bands. You can find that RCC administration are in favor of identification of IMT, but at the same time, we need to ensure compatibility with other radio systems. And IMT system shall not impose additional regulatory or technical constraints on the service having primary allocation on this frequency band. Okay, next slide, please. You can see the RCC current usage of frequency band 6425 to 7125 megahertz. We have the fixed service microwave links. Actually, we have more than 1,000 stations, and coordination may be required, but we located mostly outside the cities. FSS geostationary usage mostly in the first 100 megahertz, and for other spectrum, it is limited usage of geostationary FSS. We also have some system for no geostationary FSS, but we have very limited number of such systems. Also, we have space operation service and ESS passive we need to protect. And actually, we have radio astronomy service, but we have only 3 stations of radio astronomy located outside big cities, actually somewhere in mountains. So we expect we no any limitation would be for, or big limitation would be for the IMT. In the 2020 in RCC, there was a questionnaire on 5G spectrum use and plans. And regarding the answering, Russian Federation has identified the interested for this band, and we have planned to implement this. And in accordance with the Russian regulators' work plan for 2021, the full-scale test for 6 gigahertz IMT equipment are planned. Also, the RCC country has sent the license statement to the 3GPP to invite 3GPP to consider this frequency band in the 3GPP specification for IMT 2020 in order to ensure the timely availability of 5G new radio equipment to enable the deployment of IMT 2020 system in RCC country. So with that, I I want to conclude my short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergey. Perfect. Thank you. Very, very interesting insights on the good progress that we see from the RCC. I would like now to thank you again. I would like now to turn to Professor Antonio Sassano. Antonio is president of Fondazione Ugo Bordoni, that is the in-house independent foundation which assists the Italian public administration on all the ICT issues. Full professor of combinatorial optimization at the Department of Computer Control and Management Engineering at the University of Rome. Has been consultant for the Italian government and the national regulators, AGCOM, AGCM, in many decisions concerning management and awarding of spectrum. Has been president of the commission overseeing the parity of access to the network of the incumbent operator Telecom Italia. Antonio will be presenting some specific views on the development of Internet of Things, the role that 5G has with this respect, and will be touching upon spectrum requirements associated with the so-called service networks. He will be also considering different licensing approaches for the 6 GHz band. So thank you, Antonio. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Alessandro. Good morning, everybody, and many thanks to the organizers for inviting me to contribute to this very interesting webinar. My point today is to stress the fact that the Internet of Things will be one of the key features of 5G, and that the local licensed use of 6 GHz band could be crucial to enable IoT. Next slide, please. So the growing request of 5G spectrum by the vertical sectors, transportation, health, utilities, factories, and so on, is one of the most important aspects of the so-called 5G revolution. Internet of Things will produce a materialization of Internet. Each vertical service will require its own network to connect and enable its own objects. Every service in every sector, here you can see some example, automotive, logistics, utilities, will be enabled by a network of connected objects in order to provide a superior quality of service to users. Each service will become a service network. This will be the materialization of the Internet. Next slide, please. Service providers, all the owners of the services, let's say, will accept with increasing reluctance to have their network, their basic process, data, and services managed by someone else's spectrum. Due to its apparent role of IoT enabler, the wireless portion of the network will be the first one to be challenged by the service providers, with a growing request for a local licensed spectrum. In fact, I think, and I strongly believe, that a huge number of transmitters and the equivalent amount of connected objects will be required. Consequently, huge investments in service networks will ensure the activation of these networks. This is a key point, because the service providers will require will ask for stability of spectrum and technology to protect their investments. Not global flexible networks with flexible spectrum assignments, as we always thought about 5G, but local licensed with long-term stable assignments. For example, just an example that I want to mention, the decision of the German regulator to assign 100 megahertz of valuable 3.5 gigahertz band spectrum to a regional use, and the analogous strategic decision taken by Ofcom, 3.8, 4.2 gigahertz band to local and shared use, and ARCEP, are clear answer to this growing request. The key spectrum management tool for enabling this 5G revolution, in my opinion, is the awarding of spectrum rights in limited areas for long periods of time. Hence, we are not talking of limited speculative use of white spaces or the classical sporadic access to Wi-Fi networks. This should be an exclusive licensed use of spectrum and should grant safe and secure deployment of standard 5G equipment in protected areas. A local use that should be complementary to the nationwide coverage of the general purpose wireless carrier. Next slide, please. Now, the conclusions and some questions. The debate concerning the spectrum management rules to make 6 GHz spectrum available to the market cannot miss this critical issue and must include a new dimension alongside with the I license and IMT license nationwide spectrum. A third option should be considered a local license spectrum. I have some questions that you can read on the slide, but I have a final important question with which I want to immediately close my intervention. Is the upper 6 GHz band sufficient for a local and nationwide license use? So I'm posing the problem whether the upper 6 GHz band can be enough to satisfy all the needs that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sassano. Thank you for sharing these very interesting and stimulating views, which help us to understand the possible future use of this frequency band. I would like now to turn to Mr. Chris Walford, Director of International Spectrum Policy at Ofcom UK. His responsibility covers the UK's international spectrum interests, especially in relation to the ITU and CPT. He's a member of Ofcom Spectrum Executive Team and Strategy Steering Group. Chris is active in various European spectrum committees and is currently serving as the ECC chairman. Chris has a degree in mathematics and statistics from Manchester University, and Chris will explain to us what Ofcom and the UK have done with reference to the lower 6 GHz band, 5.9 to 6.4 GHz, and we'll also share the initial thinking on the upper part of the band. Thank you, Chris. The floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Alessandro, and good morning to everybody, or good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you're listening from. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in the UK. If we go to the next slide. So first I want to talk a little bit generally in terms of what we're doing. And we all know that there are an increasing range of diverse services and applications that need access to spectrum. And as a spectrum manager, from a regulatory perspective, we need to respond to those diverse needs. So we're continuing to make spectrum available, authorized, usually at a national level, in terms of our licensing framework, through things like auctions. In fact, indeed, we're currently planning for our next spectrum award, and that will continue to be an important mechanism in terms of making spectrum available for license purposes. We're also making spectrum available for license exempt applications, as we've always done, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the 6 GHz band and what we've done there. But increasingly, we're also thinking about how we can make spectrum available to meet some of those, as I say, diverse potential use cases. Things like shared access licenses, local access licenses, all these different types of user needs that require access to spectrum. We're trying to ensure that we can get spectrum out in different ways to meet the needs of the various users of spectrum. So if we go to the next slide, what we've done in terms of the 6 GHz band, we've done quite a bit of work in relation to the lower 6 GHz bands. That's 5925 to 6425. And we published a statement in the summer of last year, which followed an extensive consultation that had been kicked off from January of last year. And in this statement, we would confirm that we were making the 5925 to 6425 megahertz band available for Wi-Fi and other related wireless technologies. And in particular, there are two main use cases there that we've made the spectrum available for. Firstly, outdoor, very low power devices, could be outdoor or indoor, that's up to 25 milliwatts. And then indoor devices, low power indoor devices up to 250 milliwatts. So those are the two main use cases that we made spectrum available for in July 2020. In taking forward that work, there were just a couple of points that I wanted to just mention. Firstly, we noted the importance of engaging in the international discussions and the benefits of global harmonization, particularly for mass market equipment such as Wi-Fi. Global harmonization is key. We also wanted to promote the benefits of a simple regulatory regime. We wanted a regime that would allow manufacturers to get equipment, particularly consumer equipment, onto the market quickly and easily. So that's what we've done in relation to the 5925 to 6425 megahertz band, the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band. And that is now done, as I say, with that statement that was issued in July last year. If we go on to the next slide, my final slide, we're also now looking at the upper part of the 6 gigahertz band. Now, our thinking here is at a much, much earlier stage. But as I mentioned, we did publish this statement on the lower 6 gigahertz band. And in looking at the responses to that consultation, which was issued in January last year, a number of respondents did note even then that there would be similar technical challenges above 6425, i.e. in 6425 to 7125. In other words, what you've done in the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band, why don't you do that in the upper 6 gigahertz band as well? So that's one aspect we're thinking about. We're also, of course, very aware, and as others have already said, about the WRC 23 agenda item, looking at this band in Region 1. The European preparations for WRC are underway, but again, the thinking here is still at an early stage, but we are taking that forward as part of the European preparations through the ECC CPG process, and the UK will be fully contributing to that. And indeed, I mean, we are very much monitoring developments in other countries around the world. I mean, we're aware of developments in the US, in Canada, in Korea, in relation to this band and what's happened there. And we're engaging actively in the international discussions around this, including in conferences such as this. So as I say, the thinking is at an early stage, but we are giving this some active thought and will continue to do so over the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yes, the international dimension of this discussion is really key, and this is one of the reasons for this webinar, of course. Let's now turn to Mr. Jan Engelberg, Senior Advisor working for Digital Connection, Digital Infrastructure Unit in the Finnish Transport and Communication Agency, Traficom. He has been working in Traficom and its predecessor since 2000. Starting as radio network specialist. Main responsibilities have been on national licensing, cross-border frequency coordination, spectrum options, and international work in various groups at CEPT, ITUR, and European Commission. And he has been participating at WRCs since a long time, since 2007. He will be presenting the status of the ongoing discussions in Finland. The floor is yours. Yeah.
And good afternoon, everyone. The agenda item wanted to address several frequency bands, and in our view, only 6 gigahertz frequency band is important for Europe under this agenda item. Studies at ITUR are focusing the frequency range 6425 to 7125 megahertz, and this band already has a mobile allocation. In Finland, this frequency band is heavily used by fixed service, and there are about 700 link hops in use. And this frequency band is very important for mobile operators due to high capacity connections and long hop lengths. The lower frequency 6 GHz frequency band is also used by fixed service, but in the near future, as mentioned by Chris in the previous presentation, it will be used for wireless local area networks or short range devices. And we see that this might increase usage in this upper 6 GHz frequency bands for fixed service. In Finland, mobile operators are using all available spectrum, and there is no more spectrum available between 694 to 3800 megahertz. So it's clear that there is a need for these mid-band frequencies for IMT. We also see that there will be a global equipment market in the 6 GHz band. We also recognize the importance of this band and will support sharing and compatibility studies and preparatory work in CPT and ITU. So the situation in Finland is quite clear at this stage. It will be used by the fixed service for the time being, but we recognize that this band is useful for IMT in the future, and we need these capacity bands below millimeter wave ranges. So this concludes my short presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Let's now move to Mr. Šarūnas Oberauskas, Advisor of Spectrum Engineering Divisions at RRT, Communications Regulatory Authority in Lithuania. He's been working with RRT since 2005 with the wide range of responsibilities related to radio communication systems, fixed and mobile services. Experience in performing electromagnetic compatibility analysis, important contributions to the development of cross-border agreements, represents national interest in CPT, ECCPT1, CPG-PTD, and in various ITUR groups, including 5D. Member of the Lithuanian delegation for WRC 12, 15, and 19. And since 2018, Šarūnas chairs one of the two sub-working groups in ECCPT1. Šarūnas will tell us about the situation of the current users in the band and perspectives for the future use of the 6 GHz band in Lithuania. Hi, Šarūnas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandro. Thank you, Alexandro, and thanks for Forum Europe for this opportunity to participate in this event. And good morning or afternoon to everyone. I will talk about current spectrum situation of low and mid bands in Lithuania. So let's go to the next slide, please. I will start with the overview of the licensed spectrum available for mobile operators, and this is provided in the figure on the left side. As you can see, three big mobile operators use 800, 900, 1800, 2100, and 2600 MHz bands, and they are deploying 2G, 3G, and 4G networks. We expect to launch auctions for 700 MHz and 3.6 GHz bands in the first quarter of the year to start 5G rollout. 26 GHz band is not shown in the figure, as our discussions today are focusing more on mid-bands. In order to ensure that consumers can compare and choose mobile operator that suits their needs, as a regulator, we perform coverage calculations for three technologies: GSM, UMTS, and LTE. The figure on the right shows the expected coverage of LTE network of one of mobile operator. We consider three different signal levels which correspond to specific environments. And you can see that for signal level of -115 dBm, LTE networks cover approximately 99% of territory. And for more information, please visit the link where you will find details on individual mobile operator, including other technologies. Next slide, please. In addition to coverage calculations, we are also modeling theoretical throughput of LTE networks. This helps evaluate the implementation of European Union strategic objectives and the requirements set out in the operator's licenses, and capability of mobile operator to provide certain user experience data rate. These are purely theoretical simulations with some technical assumptions listed on the slide. And for example, actual implementation of MIMO and carrier aggregation in LTE networks are shown in the figure on the left. The results for theoretical modeling for one-off mobile operator are presented on the maps. Since the load of base stations in LTE networks is constantly changing, the calculations are done for two network load factors. 10% represents lightly loaded and 50% heavily loaded network. Maps illustrate where we could, in theory, achieve 30 or 100 megabits per second with the current spectrum available to one-off mobile operator. We can also see the impact of network load. And if you are interested for more information on other operator situation, please visit the link below. Next slide, please. WRC 23 agenda item 1.2 is looking for possible identification for IMT in 6 GHz band and some others as well. In Lithuania, this band is used by fixed service and fixed satellite service. We have 201 registered microwave links. They are used by 3 big mobile operators. The upper figure on the left side shows deployment of these links, and in the figure below, the color boxes indicate spectrum occupancy by these links. Regarding FSS, there is one Earth station operating in Earth-to-space mode in rural environment, and it's shown in the brown dot on the map if you can spot it. The allotment and the plan covered by the provisions in Appendix 30B are not used currently. And we don't have information on Earth stations operating in space-to-Earth mode, as registration is voluntary for them. So in considering 6 GHz band for possible mobile usage, we support performing compatibility and sharing studies with incumbent services. But we have a critical point, which I would like to mention, is that we need to take into account the trends for mobile data traffic in Europe. The forecast in the figure on the right clearly indicates that mobile data traffic will increase tenfold in the upcoming 10 years, and new spectrum will be needed for mobile. Final slide, please. So with that, I would like to thank you for attention, and we are looking for the opportunities. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Sarunas. A very, very informative presentation. We'd like now to close the Regulators Corner session and open the Industry Corner, where we are finding Marit Palovirta, Director Regulatory Affairs at ETNO, European Telecommunication Network Association, comprising more than 25 operators in Europe. Marit has extensive expertise in telecom, broadband, and internet matters. She's joined ETNO from Internet Society, and she's also coming from a 6 years experience at Cisco. Strong European academic background from College of Europe, London School of Economics, and King's College. Marit will be presenting us the opportunities that ETNO sees for mobile operators in Europe for the 6 GHz band. Marit, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. So my name is Marit Palovirta, and I work for ETNO. ETNO is the European Association for Telecommunication and Network Operators. You can move on to the first slide, please. Yes, so just a few words. So just to give you an idea of who we are. And ETNO members, we represent in terms of our investment footprints about, and actually over 70% of all investment in fixed and mobile networks in Europe. So spectrum, of course, is a key resource to our members. Next slide, please. And I'll talk today about the current status with the 6 GHz band, but also then, of course, looking forward in the few years in the midterm bands in general. And I'll start with a few remarks on the current status. So we heard already that the lower part of the 6 GHz band is being harmonized for wireless access systems as well as radio LAN on an unlicensed basis in the EU. And this will then allow the use of low power indoor devices as well as very low powered devices that can be also used outdoors. Now, the harmonized use for unlicensed equipment in the EU will mean that anybody can use this equipment without any separate permission across the different countries. And now, despite the fact that the lower powered device category is limited only for indoor use in order to avoid interference, we still have some concerns from the operator's side, as it will be difficult to guarantee that the equipment is only used indoors, as with this unlicensed regime, of course, the exact users are unknown. And in terms of the upper 6 gigahertz band, which is currently under study for IMT, for the WRC 23 in Region 1, we fully support, so ETNO, we fully support the upper 6 gigahertz band for the IMT opportunity. And we believe that it is feasible to define conditions within the WRC for IMT use in the coming years. And of course, this is not only a question about Europe either, and it was mentioned earlier by the previous speakers. So wider or global harmonization is also very important then to make sure that we support the general development of the mobile telecommunications ecosystem, as well as then support the business case and the economies of scale from the operator's point of view. Now, Europe is a good-sized market as a whole and a fairly well-functioning market, but sometimes there are differences in licensing regimes and timelines that can create fragmentation in the market. And the final point regarding the current status is that the primary use of the 6 gigahertz band is, as again it was mentioned earlier, is for fixed and fixed satellite services. And of course, mobile operators are amongst these primary users of this current band. And it's a very important resource for backhauling services from our point of view for existing 4G and 5G services. And this is especially the case in rural areas, as this band enables longer haul links. And so from operators' perspective, when we think about the current status and also the future use, it is important that we will be able to continue to accommodate the needs for the fixed links that are currently using this band in order to provide high quality services for our customers, as well as then, of course, from a policy perspective to make sure that we are trying to meet the common European connectivity objectives that we share. Next slide, please. So looking forward, in general, we believe, and ETNO members consider, that new mid-band IMT spectrum is needed in the mid to long term to meet the demand that is foreseen, especially stemming in the urban areas. And as we already heard as well, so mid-band spectrum has specific characteristics that will enable it to provide both high capacity as well as coverage. So for example, this can enable outdoor to indoor propagation. And this is something that, for example, millimeter wave spectrum cannot provide. So, and as we look forward, the mid-band spectrum demand is, of course, in the short term driven by existing use cases, but also there's a lot of work being done from the operator's side to create new use cases that 5G will, in the coming years, enable. And if you're interested to see a bit more about the work that operators are doing on these new use cases, we did a series of seminars, webinars in the autumn with our members to demonstrate some use case examples in the area of healthcare, manufacturing, and smart cities. And you'll find these resources on the ETNO website. But as well as these use cases, of course, in general, the mobile data traffic and usage is increasing all the time. And when we are considering the existing use cases, let's take the consumer market, for example, and the use case of media consumption. So it is not so much that consumers all of a sudden will be using much more of media services. It is more the case that the delivery, the technical characteristic of the services is changing towards higher definition, higher resolution solutions that 5G will enable. And hence there will be a requirement for more capacity. And this is as such, of course, nothing new, because we saw a very similar similar trend as 4G and 3G were coming in. But in general, so we believe that the upper 6 gigahertz band offers an excellent opportunity to meet the demand, this new demand in Europe. And there is, of course, this transition period, so to speak, and it is very important that the upper 6 gigahertz band should be preserved for fixed links to serve the mobile backhauling in the short term, but that it will be then made available for new 5G mobile services to provide these high quality solutions in the mid to long term. We also believe that a license approach is the best approach to enable this transition in a smooth manner, so that we can also protect the existing use of this band in the 6 gigahertz. And this will help avoid interference and in terms of disturbance of other existing services. And of course, the licensed approach, it will do this and enable this because the license includes very specific conditions that the license users must abide to, which of course then makes it also easier to control in a way that the license conditions are met. And because of these reasons, we also believe that a license approach would actually allow for higher transmission powers compared to what is allowed currently or will be allowed in the near future currently with the radio LAN in Europe. So I will conclude my initial remarks here and look forward to continue the discussion in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Excellent. And thank you for sharing so clearly the opportunity that mobile operators see in the possible future use for IMT of the 6 GHz band. I would like now to turn to Ayman Moeldin, that is Senior Specialist on Spectrum Regulation at Nokia, 20 years of professional experience in radio research, spectrum regulation, and standardization. When she joined Nokia in 2007, she has been since then standardization and spectrum team expert, and she has been active in CPT and ATU and ITUR meetings throughout these years, always involved in the WRC preparation process. Ayman holds a Master in Science and Communication Engineering from Technical University on Munich. Ayman will be presenting on behalf of the 4 hosting vendors the views from equipment suppliers on the 6 GHz band. Thank you, Ayman. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alessandro, for giving us the opportunity to present on behalf of ZTE, Nokia, Huawei, and Ericsson our views on this 6 gigahertz and how it can improve the society and the impact on life on different usage scenarios that is foreseen for 5G that will extend the 5G usages from what we have started back in 2013 in ITUR, and this is a continuous process and evolution of this technology. So if you can start with the first, thank you. So we have seen now from Colliago study that there is also a need for a spectrum in a mid-band, and it's in, let's say, 2025, 2030. This is not far away. This is like, let's say, in 4 or 5 years, and then it's going to extend over. So we have to address as well the user experience data rate, and it's clear behind this spectrum need, additional spectrum is needed to satisfy certain kind of requirement, like downlink and uplink experience data rates. These are included in the 5G vision in the ITUR recommendation 2083. But why we are speaking here about the 6 gigahertz? Why the 6 gigahertz itself? 6 gigahertz is one of the key bands in the mid-band spectrum that is globally allocated to mobile services on a primary basis from an ITUR perspective. It gives a balance the propagation conditions, the radio propagation conditions and capacity. It gives a good balance. It gives a reasonable coverage, and at the same time, it will offer capacity. When you compare it with the C band, the 3.5 gigahertz band, there is having the same feature and same possibilities that according to this coverage. And it was as well, it has also, we have a 700 megahertz available in this band to be used for 5G services. And this is a large contiguous block of spectrum that need to support the 5G services and use cases. Also looking at it from the economical point of view, it also gives a potential that you will have a wider economic of scale if this band is going to be used for 5G services. Thus, we see that this 5 gigahertz band has a potential in terms of providing the coverage and capacity that is needed to satisfy certain kind of use cases. And it will help improve the quality of life in citywide area. If we can move to the second slide. But this additional mid-band spectrum needs is also connected with as well key driver and use cases that needed to be used in a citywide area. So these use cases are foreseen to realize the 5G vision, and there are going to be also other different usage cases. So I have seen in one of the reports there are almost more than 50 use cases that can solve our urgent business cases as well as our social impact. And I just have here in this slide, I'm just categorizing them in 5 use cases just for an easy to understand them. And this will be, for example, a mobile broadband of a citywide video consumption. And you can see under it, there are also different use cases, smaller use cases, which can be utilized. We will have also the network for safe and smart cities as well, like security, surveillance, and different other use cases. And most importantly, we have the Industry 4.0. This is also an enterprise and business potential use cases, which is currently ongoing and demanding as well additional spectrum with a sort of a quality of service and reliability need to be connected on that. Because those use cases are of a high importance to improve the social life, and hence they need as well a kind of a quality and reliable connection. Then we have the fixed wireless is one of the use cases that could be utilized by the 6 gigahertz band. But most importantly, this national-wide connectivity or the objective of a national-wide connectivity. For example, in Europe, they have 3 objectives, and those 3 objectives are firstly that they are wanted to have 1 gigabit per second for school, for public sector, and taking into consideration currently the situation which we are currently having. Specifically now I'm in Germany, and I have my kids are staying at home, and the teachers need to give them also lectures at home. So and the situation requires that we need more reliable solution, that if they are going to do their school things, they are not going to be interrupted. So this is one of the objectives which I currently now with my personal life I can connect to it. There is also the 100 megabit per second speed that it needed. This is needed for all households. This is from the Europe Objective 2025. And there is also the contiguous and uninterrupted services. So all of those drivers is a key for us to discuss to understand and how to satisfy this with affordable cost and how we can provide them through this wireless connectivity. And we have to think about that the same spectrum can be used also in different areas. This is in a mid-band. So second slide, please. So this was the driver, the use cases, the driver for additional mid-band spectrum. But now we have to look at the 5G ecosystem and what is currently is being done in 3GPP, in ITUR, and as well what is industry is doing. In ITUR, we have currently the study, the sharing study under the WRC 23 Agenda Item 1.2. There is also a discussion about the parameters to be used for those sharing studies. And there is an exchange between 3GPP and ITUR on the IMT parameters to be used for Agenda Item 1.2. And from the timeline, you can see that it's going to finish around mid this year, and then we can start doing our sharing studies. There is as well 3GPP. They have studied a new work item, and based on RCC, they have expressing their intention to have this ban for the use of IMT system, and they brought it up to 3GPP. 3GPP had initiated a work item, and the work item is for the license used covering both upper and lower spectrum band, and this is undergoing, and it's supposed maybe to be finished by 2022. I'm not quite sure how is it going in 3GPP, but this is supposed to be. There is as well in around the year 2021, there is also from IMT 2020 promotion, they are starting field trials on this 6 gigahertz. This is how is it going. So in the interest of time, can you go back to the second slide, please, Lisandro? The second one, Lisandro, this is the economic, the second one. You are not moving on the right one. This is a slide showing you some simulation which have been done, and that shows how is the coverage is comparable with a 3.5 gigahertz band. And you can see that in a longer term, the 3.4 up to 3.8 might not be sufficient to satisfy all those use cases. So we need an additional one. And we see a 6 gigahertz band could be a complement to address the capacity need that needed. And I will jump to this is I have just received that maybe my time is up. I have to make my conclusion, but this is also an observation on how is the incumbent looking like, and if you can see that the incumbent currently is a fixed satellite, fixed services, which is more or less is a long distance or mainly in a rural, and it had a link by link assignment. And for the coexistence and sharing, we can see that maybe we could have some similar ideas, like we have a coexistence toolbox, like you can have a coordination, you can have also, for example, several combination of different mitigation techniques, like also migration to other bands. This is also could be sort of, but this is all just an observation, and depending on the sharing study, which is currently going to be carried in the ITUR and in CPT, CPT1. So the same observation we are having for the fixed satellite service. And can you jump to the second slide, please, Alessandro? For the fixed satellite service, one of the observation which we will have, that it's important that the fixed links uplink should be protected, because this is a global issue. An agreement need to be reached on the ITUR level. But we also have noticed that there is also 3GPP ecosystem, which is in the 3.3 up to 4.2. We have also ecosystem from 3GPP on 4.4 up to 5 gigahertz band. So those ecosystem could also help to improve and taking their initial advances in the technology could help to improve the coexistence with FFS. As well, for our observation towards WRC23, that currently there are different advances in the technology. There are new technologies being used for IMT and as well for other technologies, and this could also be taken into consideration when we are using the recent propagation models, the recent advances in technologies from the ITUR recommendation and reports into this. We feed these onto those sharing and coexistence. Could also improve the situation a bit. So maybe coming to making my conclusion on that, for Europe, from a vendor community, we think that we need to have a balanced approach between the unlicensed and licensed approach. Europe have decided for the lower part, and there is a decision 2001 about the use of the band for wireless application and radio access. And this is a good, and we welcome this. From the vendor community, we welcome the decision from Europe, and we are supporting it. But we also, on the other hand, we see that the WRC 23 process an opportunity. It's an opportunity to look at the upper band, the 6.425 up to 7.125, to look at it in a fresher look, in a good look, and to see how it will bring to the IMT society. Thank you very much, and this is end my presentation.
Thank you for sharing the vendors' views, Ayman. I would like briefly, we're running a bit out of time, I must say. I would like to turn to Glyn Carter again, Senior Spectrum Advisor for GSMA, who will be presenting an industry statement on the 6 GHz band. Thank you, Glyn.
Well, hello again, everyone. I just want to present some key points regarding the 6 GHz band for IMT. IMT is the efficient way to provide broadband wireless connectivity on a worldwide scale and greatly contribute to global economic growth and social development. IMT technology development and deployment continues contributing to creating a large amount of new jobs and GDP growth. 5G is a pillar of digital transformation, enhancing mobile broadband and enabling new use cases. 5G connectivity is essential for development of new information technologies such as IoT, cloud computing, big data, artificial intelligence, among others. User mobile data consumption is increasing and will keep growing rapidly, and not only for human users. More spectrum is needed for 5G to meet future network capacity and coverage demand for citywide use cases. And in particular, the 6 GHz band is a strong candidate to offer seamless high capacity citywide with licensed spectrum. WRC23 preparatory work has started in the ITUR in relation to the possible IMT identification of the 6 GHz band, and the standardization work in 3GPP is also on the way. We therefore recommend policymakers and stakeholders to carefully assess the opportunity of IMT identification within the 6 GHz band at WRC23, which will be an important aspect to establish large-scale ecosystem for this band. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Glyn. We will now close the session providing the views from industry, and we will enter with a bit of delay, I must say, the Q&A. For this, I would like to leave the floor to Dan.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to bring you down off the screen now because I know you're going to be making your way over to the Q&A, so I will let you go to do that now. So whilst Alessandro is making his way over to the Q&A platform, I'd like to invite you all to please do the same. So as you can see from the screen here, what you need to do is to click on the tab on the left menu bar that's labeled Q&A session. When you get in there, you'll see the meeting room there. Click on the meeting room and that will take you into the Q&A area of the platform. So all of our speakers will be joining us for the Q&A. So I can see, well, I've seen on the chat, we already have a number of questions which we'll be putting to the speakers, but any additional questions that you have, in the same way, please do use the chat on the right-hand side of your screen to also add those, and Alessandro will then put those to our speakers. So once again, use the menu on the left-hand side to click on the Q&A session, and our speakers will be joining us there. So we'll see you over there shortly, and we'll be addressing some of the questions and comments that you're raising. Thank you very much, and see you in the Q&A session very shortly. I can see some of our speakers are starting to come up now, which is great. So as I said, we're just waiting for Alessandro to join us, and then we can get going with the session. A quick reminder for everyone, all of the speakers who are with us up on the stage now, if I could ask you all to mute your microphone when you're not being asked a question, and then Alessandro will address the questions to yourselves as they come in, and then we can obviously unmute you as and when that happens and the questions come in. And a reminder to everybody out there in the audience, please do add any questions that you might have for our panelists and our speakers. Please add those using the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll be addressing those very shortly. I can see as well that there were a number of questions that have been asked whilst the presentations are going on. So we'll be, of course, starting with those and putting any other questions that we have as well. So I can see, though, that Alessandro is with us here as well. We have a number of speakers here, Alessandro. We're still waiting for a few more to join, so we'll bring those up very shortly. But in the meantime, I will pass over to you. I can see Mindaugas is coming up now as well. But Alessandro, we'll pass over to you, and we can get started with this part of the session.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. So I'm not sure if Mindaugas is actually already available. If not, then we can move on to the questions themselves. What do you suggest?
I think let's maybe do that. Let's start off with the questions,
okay.
And we'll try and get Mindaugas and Meta as well, who I think is hopefully going to join shortly. Oh, there's Mindaugas now. Mindaugas has just joined, so maybe we can do that and then on to the questions after that.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Mindaugas. Can you hear us, first of all?
Yes, of course.
Excellent.
Can you hear me?
Very well, very well. Could you please introduce yourself very briefly and share a couple of thoughts on this debate?
I would like just to congratulate, I am Deputy Director General of Communication Regulatory Authority. I'm dealing with the telecommunication issues more than 25 years already. So I would like to congratulate your organizers and speakers. It was a very interesting webinar. I would say it's a good start for preparation World Radio Conference 23. It was clearly shown the benefits for consumers, and you convinced that the spectrum is really needed in up to 2030. So we have 10 years period. So generally speaking, this time period is enough to change a spectrum, to move one technology from one band and to move it to another band. For the same, for example, was done with DVB-T, as you know, in 2006, Geneva 2006 agreement, left 10 years period of time to countries make TV replanning and to switch off analog television. For majority of countries, it was enough, and all countries, almost all countries, fulfilled such obligation. Also, our experience with C-band, we started in 2007, and after 12 years, we already have implementation. So 10 years is enough to make a relocation of spectrum. Other point, it was mentioned at the point of compatibility. Yeah, the main issue is compatibility with FSS. At first we should ensure this compatibility. If we can do it, it's opened huge possibilities to IMT service to fixed wireless access, and the benefit was clearly shown. But at first, we should ensure compatibility. Even if we reach compatibility with FSS, with satellite receivers, we will have still a problem compatibility with the incumbent service, fixed service, radio relay line, and PMAC as well in the same frequency band. So if we could, you see, such countries as China, Russia, maybe USA, they can do without taking much attention to the coordination issue. In Europe, we have a different situation. In Europe, is a lot of small countries, and as was shown during your presentation, that coordination distance could reach up to 65 kilometers. So all our radio relay stations are coordinated. So in our initial coordinators showed that even if we took into account only long-term interference, we need this coordination distance up to 80 kilometers. If one country decided to stay with radio relay line, it could simply block development in other countries. Therefore, what we should do in Europe to start to change 5G roadmap, to develop SEC report decisions, and if we want to harmonize use of this frequency band, we should to think about decision in the radio spectrum committee of European Union. So it's such short my remarks to your seminar, and once again I would like to congratulate you with very good step forward and wish you all success. Thank you, Alessandro. Alessandro, can you hear me? Or
okay, sorry, I had troubles. Yeah, I had troubles unmuting. I'm not sure why. Okay, thank you very much, Mindaugas. This was really interesting, and I agree with you that spectrum policy is a lot about long-term planning. And these debates, we would like to ensure informed decisions at the right time. I see also that Meta has joined us. Thank you, Meta. Could you please briefly introduce yourself and share with us your point? Good morning, Meta.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Mita Paušek-Taško. I'm coming from Slovenia. I'm regulator. I'm head of mobile service. And yes, I mean, Slovenia has supported the work item for WRC23 to identify, to study and possibly identify the frequency band upper 6 gigahertz. The COVID crisis in Slovenia showed the need for more spectrum, even up to 200%. And they were optimizing networks. So they wanted to start the spectrum award as soon as possible. Slovenia started the multi-band auction. But beside that, spectrum which the auction will bring, this will be up to 100 contiguous megahertz per operator. There would be the need in second phase from 2025 to 2030, at least between 200 per 400 megahertz per operator. And this is because of growing data consumption with square or even exponential curve, which is driven by new applications such as HD, UHD video, or augmented virtual. And as well, the COVID could be option within CAPT. We believe that besides the already assigned bands, that would be the upper 6 GHz band. 3.4 to 3.8 and upper 6 GHz bands are complements, and that the new technological features such as precise direction control, 5G active antenna systems, high bandwidth and low power spectrum density will help implementing coexistence with fixed and fixed satellite service. Coordination is easier under the licensing regime, and in Slovenia are prevailing long hop, high tower fixed links in this 6 GHz band, which coexistence with IMT will be less of an issue. And for the fixed satellite protection, we believe that similar approach with exclusion zones may be implemented, such as in 3.4, 3.8 GHz band. Thank you. That is our view.
Thank you very much, Meta. Now, we are a bit late. I wonder if it is acceptable, Dan, to extend by maybe 5 minutes the closure of this webinar. Is that something that is acceptable?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, or even longer if there's more questions. So no problem at all. So we can continue for a little bit. No problem at all, Alessandra.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we hope that you will be able to stay with us for a bit longer. Okay, so we did receive quite a few questions. Would like to go through some of them. There is one question that I would like to pass to the administrations, which are now connected with us. And basically, I would like to ask, leaving aside the coexistence with incumbent services issue, which is a problem which is well understood, and this is why the WRC process is ahead of us. What are the other key elements that you think will be at the basis, will need to be at the basis of your decisions? And also, what other challenges do you expect when considering this frequency band? For example, from some sentences I heard from some of the speakers, could coordination with neighboring countries be an element in taking decisions with this band? So I wonder if there is anyone that would like to take this question.
Yes, Alexandra, I probably could take this one.
Thank you.
So thank you for that question. And probably as mentioned by Mindaugas, I would like to echo that for us as a small country in the eastern side of Europe, coordination with non-European countries is essential, actually. So even when coexistence with incumbent services could be achieved, it is important that conditions could allow operators to deploy their networks close to the border. But more often than not, same frequency band in non-European countries are used differently, and long negotiations could be required. So actually, in order to achieve these satisfactory results, the parameters of those incumbent systems are the key elements in order for us to be able to model the scenarios more accurate and to reach good bilateral coordination conditions for mobile usage. And that's why we think that the license approach would be better in enabling us in resolving those coordination issues. So just that would be my remark on that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarunas.
Could I just come in here as well as a UK perspective? I mean, I think just stepping back a moment. I mean, I think looking at the session we've just had, and particularly the chat functions, I mean, I think it is clear that there is a desire to see if we can use the upper 6 gigahertz band more effectively. So you've got the incumbent use, but there is the potential to put other uses in there. And I think the key thing from our perspective would be trying to identify what is the best way of using that spectrum, what is the best way of delivering benefits to consumers, businesses, etc. And that's the sort of the fundamental question. I think it's clear that there are very different views on the answer to that, particularly between the licensed and licensed exempt side of the fence. I think that's the first question. Then it comes into, you know, how will those new services potentially deal with incumbent users? How do you deal with coordination with neighbouring countries? I think the harmonisation aspects are really key as well. I mean, and noting what's going on both in terms of the WRC process, but also what's happening in other parts of the world and where this band has already been made available. So I think there's a number of factors that need to be taken into account before we can really determine exactly how we're going to move forward in this band. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Other views before we turn to the next question? Okay, I would like to pick up from earlier questions in the chat box, something which is really relevant to the modeling that was performed by Coleago in particular. So I see questions asking, what about small cells? Have they been accounted? Or also, what is the relationship between the 6 GHz band availability and the availability which will happen earlier of millimeter waves? Has this been accounted in the studies? So I would like to ask this question to Stefan, also from the modeling exercise perspective, and also to vendors or operators that would like to express their views on these issues. Stefan, could we start from you maybe?
Yes. So as regards small cells, yes, we did take this into account in 2 ways. So we assume that there will be 3 outdoor small cells for every macro cell in cities. So that implies network densification by a factor of 4. And furthermore, we have assumed an offload to indoor small cells, mid-band small cells, of 10% of demand. And also up to 30% offload to the small cells, millimeter wave small cells. So yes, this is an important aspect so as not to overestimate demand for spectrum, and we have taken care of that.
Thank you. Further views on the complementarity between, for example, millimeter waves and 6 GHz band, mid-band in general?
Alessandra, this is...
Yes, I think that the problem is that the millimeter wave spectrum has much worse propagation conditions. So in this sense, it could not be really a complement. Okay, in the small cells, indoor usage.
I must say that maybe there is a problem with the connection from Meta. Is it only on my side, Dan?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not for me either. So yeah, I think there is an issue with Meta's connection, unfortunately.
Maybe Erica.
Yes.
No.
Sorry, Meta, we cannot really hear you. Unfortunately, your voice is breaking too much. May I turn to Erica? I saw that she had an interest also for this question.
Yes, I think that it's important that when we talk about the spectrum, we really differentiate between the needs for the different spectrum ranges, and the mid-bands and millimeter wave are both needed, and they will not, it's not like if we have a lot of millimeter wave, then we can ignore mid-band. We need both, and we need a good amount of spectrum in both. So in Europe, we have been working on the 26 gigahertz a lot, and that is being released, but that doesn't mean that we don't need mid-bands. They really target different use cases, and they target, they have different goals. So while the millimeter waves are really needed for very extreme high capacity, the range that they can cover is smaller. The mid-bands, on the other hand, they can have a larger coverage, and they cannot reach as high speeds as in the millimeter wave. So again, both together are necessary.
Thank you, Erica. Maybe I can move to another question. This one is from Ethno, for Marit. In terms of timeline, when do you think European operators will start benefiting eventually from this 6 GHz band?
Thank you, Alessandro. Well, of course, this will very much depend on the demand, as we were discussing. And while there is this existing use and demand, so all the use cases that we discussed play a key role. Of course, also then the population density as such plays a role. And it's a key factor in determining national or localized demand for this. So this is, of course, as we already said, so more relevant for cities and perhaps some industrial campus networks and such. So development of those, of course, play a role. And also then, I mean, mobile networks are not the only infrastructure, so presence of existing fixed networks also is a key factor in defining how quickly the potential, use of 6 GHz, the upper band especially, will for IMT purposes will happen. So, I mean, considering all this, I mean, we expect and I guess hope as well that within the kind of 5-10 year term, we would have more mid-range spectrum, mid-band IMT spectrum for telecommunications. And of course, then, as we said, so our preferred approach would be a licensed approach, and licensing procedures in Europe and elsewhere take a lot of time. So we need to be also a bit realistic in our estimations with regards to actually the usage of any new band for IMT services. Thank you.
Thank you, Marit. One question also to Professor Sassano, if I may. You had a presentation which was focused on connectivity needs for verticals, Internet of Things. So may I ask you, how do you see these needs developing in your country, in Italy, in the coming years? We have seen that in Germany, Industry 4.0 was a key vertical that had to be addressed. Is there any specific vertical, or is it a number of verticals that you think will determine the policy decisions in Italy?
Thank you, Alessandro. Your question is indeed my root motivation for studying the technical and economic issues posed by this awarding of local spectrum. 2 points. Who is interested in Italy to this local use? Of course, we do not have something like the German automotive industry, but I see that our main utilities and transportation infrastructures are already very interested in managing the reserved portion of the spectrum. With a local, let's say, campus license or whatever. They do not like, and this is my key point, they do not like their investment in smart meters, for example, and sensors over the railway network, for example, jeopardized by the telco 5G strategies. The fact that if I manage the spectrum only with a nationwide point of view, then I forgot the fact that the objects of the IoT have their own story, and they have to be, and the investments in objects have to be protected. Moreover, I would say that also, and I conclude here, that the fabric of the Italian medium-sized manufacturing enterprises could be very receptive of this local spectrum solution. Even we do not have a very large manufacturing industries, we have small, medium-sized industries, and we know already this as a fact that they are interested in managing their own data and procedures in a protected way. And the key, and I finish here, the key is the following: how much do they care about their data and production processes? This is the fact. This is the key enabler for for the local use? Do they see that the use of a local spectrum is the best way to protect them? And this is, I think, the key point in order to see whether this local spectrum will be. And also in the discussion that we had during the seminar, one other point that emerged is the fact that the hospitals, for example, and the healthcare system should use some protected spectrum, because data and processes there are crucial, really crucial. And the idea that we can use those part of spectrum in an unlicensed way or managed by nationwide operators, in both cases is not exactly what we need. On the contrary, we need a local use of spectrum, protected spectrum, which protects the objects and of the IoT environment, and this is the crucial point.
Thank you, Antonio. And
Alessandro, maybe
please.
I can also come in on this. Of course, this is an interesting point, and certainly there's a need for verticals. But the difficulties in getting the most of the spectrum from a socioeconomic perspective have already been laid open in the German approach of setting aside 100 megahertz. On the one hand, we have an auction, and let's remember we have auctions because the objective is to assign spectrum to those who value it the most, because this then produces the greatest socioeconomic benefits. And then we say, oh no, we take 100 megahertz and we just give it away without due process. And what we have seen in Germany is very odd. Of course, we have the car manufacturers showing up and saying they have been assigned some spectrum. But there are also other companies, including Verizon and some non-manufacturing companies. What are they doing with the spectrum? Are they in fact offering some services that compete with mobile operators? How can it be justified to simply give some spectrum in a non-transparent process to verticals? And indeed, not only that, the German assignment of 100 megahertz, the whole thing is secret. It's they write, okay, there's a list of these, but it's not a full list. It's only if they consent to have their name published, these companies, and there are no details where the spectrum is, how much spectrum. All of that is in complete secrecy. That's the antithesis of transparency in spectrum management. So yes, there is a need, undoubtedly. Let them bid.
Thank you, Stefan. I think that this could be easily subject for another whole webinar dedicated to this issue. Unfortunately, we are out of our time now, and I think it's time for us to wrap up. What I can say is that clearly in the coming months and years, we will have many discussions on different aspects for this 6 gigahertz band. We are going to be discussing about the protection that incumbent users deserve, and also how to handle some of the incumbent users which are in the hands of the mobile operators themselves. Then there will be also a need to have a nice debate on how this band is going to be used. I think that especially on the second aspect, I hope that the webinar we had today has helped to give a better idea on how the 6 gigahertz band could be used in case of a licensed approach to spectrum. I would like to now really thank all of you for being with us, the speakers for contributing to this discussion. I have a feeling that there will be follow-ups. Here you can see on the screen the link to on the left side, this event where we will be posting the recording and the slides that have been shown today. You can also see in the middle the links to where you can download recordings and slides from previous 2 webinars. The first one had a global perspective. The second one was focused on LATAM countries. And then there will be also other webinars coming up. There is actually one tomorrow, which is going to focus on Asia Pacific region, another one on the RCC, and then Middle East and North Africa will be the next one. We will be posting plans for those as well. So really, a warm thank you to all of you. I wish that all of you can stay safe in coming months as well. And we really look forward to new opportunities to meet each other face to face sometime soon. So thank you very much again to all speakers and audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.